Story 1. The Phantom Hitchhiker of Blackwall Tunnel. The Blackwall Tunnel is a beast of a place. Two dark, suffocating bores carved beneath the Thames, linking London's north and south like veins in a giant's corpse. It's a road I know too well, a motorcyclist's shortcut through the city's underbelly, all 1.1 miles of flickering lights and exhaust fumes. I'm Jake, a courier by trade, weaving through London's chaos to deliver packages on time. I've ridden through that tunnel hundreds of times, day and night, rain or fog, but nothing prepared me for what happened last autumn when the tunnel showed me its teeth. It was late October, a damp evening with a chill that sank into your bones. I'd just finished a long shift, my leather jacket slick with mist, my helmet fogging slightly at the edges. The job was simple, a last-minute drop-off in Poplar, north of the river. The fastest route was through the northbound bore of the Blackwall Tunnel. I didn't think twice about it until I saw him. He was standing at the southern entrance, just beyond the glow of the tunnel's mouth, where the sodium lights cast long, jagged shadows. A young guy, maybe mid-20s, in a worn denim jacket and jeans, his thumb out like he was hitching a ride. Odd, I thought. Nobody hitches at the Blackwall Tunnel. It's a highway, not a country lane, but something about him. His pale face, his eyes catching the light like a cat's, made me slow down. He looked desperate, shivering in the cold, his breath barely visible in the damp air. I pulled over, engine idling, and flipped up my visor. "Need a lift?" I called out, voice muffled by the helmet. He nodded, quick and eager. "Yeah, mate, going north, near Poplar. Can you take me?" His voice was soft, almost too soft, like it was coming from far away. I noticed his hands were stuffed deep in his pockets, and his boots were scuffed, caked with mud that looked older than it should have been. "Hop on," I said, gesturing to the back of my bike. He climbed on without a word, his weight settling lightly, too lightly, I thought, for a guy his size. I handed him my spare helmet, and he strapped it on, his movements quick but strangely silent. I revved the engine, and we plunged into the tunnel. The Blackwall Tunnel is a beast in the dark. The walls are close, stained with decades of grime, and the lights flicker just enough to mess with your head. The hum of the engine echoed off the tiles, a low growl that drowned out everything else. I could feel him behind me, his hands gripping my waist, but he didn't speak. I tried to make small talk, shouting over the roar. "What's your name, mate?" "Tom," he said, his voice cutting through the noise clear as a bell. "Just Tom." "Rough night to be out here, Tom," I said, glancing at the rearview mirror. His face was hidden by the helmet, but I could see his eyes wide and unblinking, staring straight ahead. "You live in Poplar?" "Yeah," he said after a pause. "Used to. Got a place off Crisp Street." "Number 17. I nodded, focusing on the road. The tunnel seemed longer than usual, the lights dimmer, the air thicker. My headlight carved a narrow path through the gloom, and every now and then I swore I saw something, a shadow, darting across the lane, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. I chalked it up to fatigue. Long shifts do that to you. We were halfway through when I felt it, a sudden chill, like someone had opened a freezer door behind me. Tom's grip tightened, his fingers digging into my sides. "You ever crash in here?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. I laughed, trying to shake off the unease. "Nah, mate, I'm careful. This tunnel's a death trap if you're not." He didn't laugh back. "People die in here," he said, Lots of people. I didn't know what to say to that. The tunnel's history wasn't exactly a secret. 7 workers died building it back in the Victorian days, and there'd been plenty of accidents since. But the way he said it, like he was reciting a fact he'd lived, made my skin crawl. I pushed the thought away and focused on the road, the end of the tunnel now visible, a faint circle of light in the distance. When we emerged into the night air, I felt a wave of relief. I pulled over near Poplar just off the A13 and turned to Tom. "We're here, mate. Crisp Street's that way." No answer. I twisted around and my stomach dropped. The back of the bike was empty. The spare helmet was gone. I looked around, scanning the empty road, the shadowed pavements. Nothing. No sign of him. But I'd felt him, heard him the whole way through. My hands were shaking as I killed the engine. I sat there for a minute, trying to make sense of it. Maybe he'd slipped off somehow, though that was impossible. I'd have noticed. I checked my phone, half expecting a message or something, but there was nothing. Just the cold night and the distant hum of traffic. Then I remembered the address. Crisp Street, number 17. I didn't know why, but I had to check it. It took me 10 minutes to find the place. A narrow terraced house, tucked between a laundromat and a shuttered shop. The windows were dark, the paint peeling. I knocked, not expecting an answer. An old woman opened the door, her face wary. I explained I was looking for Tom, that he'd given me this address. Her expression changed, softened, but not in a good way. "Tom," she said, her voice trembling. "My Tom's been gone 5 years. Died in a crash right there in the Blackwall tunnel. Motorcycle went under a lorry." I don't remember what I said after that. I mumbled something, got back on my bike, and rode home, my mind racing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the tunnel, the flickering lights, Tom's pale face in the shadows. I thought that was the end of it. A one-off, a ghost story to tell mates over coffee. But the tunnel wasn't done with me. A week later, I had another late delivery, same route through the northbound bore. It was past midnight, the tunnel quieter than usual, just a few cars ahead. I was halfway through when my headlight caught something. A figure standing in the middle of the lane, motionless. I swerved, heart pounding, and nearly clipped the wall. When I looked back, there was nothing but darkness. No one could have been there. The tunnel was too narrow, too busy for someone to just stand there. But I'd seen him. Denim jacket, pale face, those same cat-like eyes. I started avoiding the tunnel after that, taking longer routes through the city, but the jobs kept coming, and sometimes there was no choice. Every time I rode through, something felt off. The lights would flicker more than usual, or my engine would stutter for no reason. Once, I heard a voice, faint but clear, right in my ear. "Slow down, Jake." I hadn't told Tom my name. The worst came a month later. Another night run, another delivery to Poplar. I was dreading the tunnel, but the client was paying double for speed. I entered the northbound bore, the walls closing in, the air heavy with that same freezer-cold chill. This time, I felt him before I saw him, the weight on the back of my bike, the faint pressure of hands on my waist. I didn't dare look back. I kept my eyes on the road, my knuckles white on the grips. "Tom," I said, my voice barely audible over the engine. No answer, but the weight shifted, like he was leaning closer. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw it. Not a face, not anymore, but a blur, like smoke shaped into a man. The bike lurched, the engine screaming as if it was fighting something. I floored it, weaving through the sparse traffic, the tunnel's end a distant promise. The weight lifted just as I hit the open air, but my spare helmet was gone again. I didn't go to Crisp Street that time. I didn't need to. I knew what I'd find. The tunnel's different now. I still ride through it. Bills don't pay themselves, but every trip feels like a gamble. Sometimes I see shadows that shouldn't be there, or my headlight catches a figure for a split second before it's gone. Other drivers talk about it too in hushed tones at courier depots. A cabbie told me he saw a man in a denim jacket waving him down, only to vanish when he slowed. A lorry driver swore his radio cut out mid-song, replaced by a voice whispering, "Watch the road." I don't know what Tom wants or why he's still here. Maybe he's trapped, tied to the tunnel where he died. Maybe he's warning me, or maybe he just needs a ride. All I know is the Blackwall Tunnel isn't just a road. It's a place where the past doesn't stay buried, where the shadows move when you're not looking. And every time I ride through, I feel him waiting at the tunnel's mouth, ready to climb on. Last night, I had another job, another run through the northbound bore. The air was thick with fog, the lights barely cutting through. I told myself it'd be fine, just another ride. But as I approached the entrance, I saw him again. Tom, standing under the sodium glow, thumb out, eyes glinting. I didn't stop this time. I couldn't. I gunned the engine and tore into the tunnel, the walls blurring past, my heart slamming in my chest. Halfway through, the bike shuddered, like something was dragging it back. I glanced in the mirror. Nothing. Just darkness. But I felt him, his hands on my waist, his voice in my ear. "You can't outrun it, Jake," he whispered. "I don't know if I'll take the tunnel again. I don't know if I have a choice. But one thing's certain. The Blackwall Tunnel doesn't let you go. Not once it's claimed you." Story 2. The Hoosac's Hungry Shadows. My name is Thomas Kane, and I was 24 when I took a job with the Hoosac tunnel crew in 1864. I'd come from Boston chasing steady work, and the promise of good pay for digging through the Berkshire Hills sounded better than starving in the city. They didn't tell us about the deaths, not at first. The Hoosac Tunnel was a marvel, they said, a 4.75-mile beast that would carve through solid rock to connect the rails of Massachusetts. But the mountain had other plans. It always did. I started as a powder monkey, hauling explosives to the blasting sites. The air inside the tunnel was thick with dust, so heavy you could taste the granite on your tongue. The work was brutal. Picks and shovels against unyielding stone, the constant threat of collapse or misfire. By the time I arrived, the tunnel had already claimed dozens of lives. Irish and German immigrants mostly, men like me who had nowhere else to go. They called it the Bloody Pit, and I learned why fast. My first week, I overheard the old-timers whispering about Ned Brinkman and Billy Nash. In 1965, they'd been part of a 3-man blasting crew. They set a nitroglycerin charge, but something went wrong. The blast buried Brinkman and Nash alive, while the third man, a wiry fella named Ringo Kelly, got out with barely a scratch. A year later, they found Ringo's body inside the tunnel, his neck purpled with strangulation marks. No one could explain it. No one was working that section when they found him. The men swore it was Brinkman and Nash, their spirits clawing out of the stone to take revenge. I laughed it off. Ghost stories were for kids, not grown men with calluses and debts. But the tunnel had a way of changing your mind. It was late October, my 3rd month on the job. The days were growing shorter, and the cold bit harder at night. We were working a deep section, maybe 2 miles in, where the air felt wrong, like it was pressing back against you. My crew was small that night. Me, a quiet German named Hans, and an engineer named Paul Travers, a Civil War vet with a limp and eyes that never settled. We were setting charges by lamplight, the flickering glow casting shadows that danced like they had minds of their own. Hans was nervous, muttering about the sounds he'd heard the night before, low moans that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I told him it was just the wind moving through the shaft, but he shook his head. "No wind down here, Tommy. No wind at all." Paul didn't say anything, just kept checking his fuse lines like he was trying to ignore us. That's when we heard it. A cry, sharp and human, echoing from deeper in the tunnel. It wasn't a scream, not exactly, more like someone calling out in pain or fear or both. We froze, our lanterns trembling in our hands. Paul raised his light, peering into the dark. "Who's there?" he shouted. His voice bounced off the walls unanswered. The cry came again, closer this time, and I felt my stomach twist. There was no one else in this section. The other crews were a mile back, closer to the east portal. Hans grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in. "It's them," he whispered, "the ones who died." "Shut up," I snapped, but my voice cracked. Paul motioned for us to follow him, his face pale but set. We moved toward the sound, our boots crunching on loose rock. The air grew colder the deeper we went, like we were walking into a winter storm. Then we saw it, a faint bluish glow flickering at the edge of our lantern light. At first, I thought it was another worker's lamp. But as we got closer, the glow sharpened into something else. It was a shape, human but wrong, floating just above the tunnel floor. No legs, no head, just a torso and arms glowing icy blue like moonlight trapped in frost. It drifted toward us, slow and deliberate, and the air turned so cold my breath caught in my chest. Hans screamed, dropping his lantern. It shattered, plunging us into near darkness, with only Paul's light holding the shadows at bay. The thing was closer now, its arms reaching out, fingers splayed like it was trying to grab something or someone. Paul shouted for us to run, and we did, stumbling over rails and tools, the blue light chasing us through the dark. I don't know how far we ran, but when we finally stopped gasping, the glow was gone. The air was still freezing, though, and I could still hear that cry in my head, looping like a broken machine. Paul didn't talk about it after. Neither did Hans. But we all knew what we'd seen. The next incident came in November. A methane gas explosion tore through a nearby shaft, killing 13 men. I wasn't there, thank God, but I helped with the recovery. The tunnel had flooded after the blast, and we waded through knee-deep water to pull out the bodies. They were mangled, their faces gray and bloated, eyes staring at nothing. The worst was a kid, barely 16, his hand still clutching a shovel like he'd tried to dig his way out. That night, the villagers near the tunnel started talking. They'd seen things on the mountain, figures moving through the mist, carrying picks and shovels, their outlines glowing faintly in the snow. One woman swore she saw a man with no head standing on a ridge, his arm swinging like he was still blasting rock. The stories spread, and soon half the crew refused to work the night shift. The foremen didn't believe in ghosts, but they couldn't ignore the fear. They started sending us in pairs, never alone, and always with extra lanterns. I didn't want to go back in, but I needed the money. So I kept working, kept ignoring the whispers in the dark. Until January, it was a bitter night, the kind where the cold seeps into your bones and stays there. I was paired with a new guy, a Scotsman named Callum, who didn't believe the stories any more than I had when I started. We were tasked with clearing debris from a collapsed section, deep in the tunnel's heart. The air was heavy, the kind of heavy that makes your chest ache, and our lanterns barely cut through the gloom. We'd been working for hours when Callum stopped, his pick raised mid-swing. "You hear that?" he asked. I didn't at first, but then it came, a low, mournful groan, like someone was sobbing just out of sight. It wasn't the wind. There was no wind this deep. I grabbed my lantern, holding it high, but the light only showed more rock, more shadows. The groan came again, louder, and then something else, a scraping like metal dragging across stone. Callum's face went white. "That's no man," he said, backing away. I wanted to argue, but the sound was getting closer, and my skin was crawling. We started moving back toward the portal, our lantern swinging wildly, when I saw it again. That blue glow, faint at first, but growing brighter. This time, it wasn't just one shape. There were 3, maybe 4, floating in a loose circle, their forms flickering like bad lantern flames. They had no faces, no heads, just glowing torsos and arms that reached out, clawing at the air. The scraping sound was louder now, and I realized it was coming from them, like they were dragging their tools through the rock, still working, still digging. Callum bolted, and I wasn't far behind. But the tunnel seemed to stretch, the exit farther than it should have been. The groans turned into whispers, words I couldn't make out, but felt in my gut, like they were pulling at me, trying to drag me back. I tripped, my lantern smashing against the ground, and for a moment I was blind in the dark, the whispers all around me. I scrambled up, running on instinct, until I saw the faint glow of the portal ahead. When we stumbled out into the snow, Callum was shaking so hard he could barely stand. "They're still in there," he kept saying. "They're still digging." I didn't argue. I'd felt it too. The weight of those shadows, their hunger. They weren't just restless, they were angry. After that, I couldn't stay. I quit the next day, took what little pay I had, and left the Berkshires behind. But the tunnel followed me. I'd wake up at night, hearing those groans, seeing that blue glow in the corners of my room. I'd close my eyes and feel the cold, like the mountain itself was reaching for me. Years later, I heard the tunnel was finished, opened for trains in 1875. They said it was a triumph, a marvel of engineering. But I also heard the stories never stopped. Miners, even now, talk about moans in the dark, lights that move on their own. Locals warn people to stay away, say the mountain never lets go of its dead. I believe them. I'm an old man now, and I haven't been back to the Hoosac. But sometimes, when the wind is quiet and the night is too dark, I hear it, that low, mournful groan, calling me back to the bloody pit. And I know deep down that those shadows are still there, still digging, still waiting. Story 3, The Cursed Kotsubo Tunnel. My name is Haruka, and I've always been drawn to the unknown, the places where shadows cling a little too tightly and the air feels heavier than it should. Growing up in Kanagawa Prefecture, I'd heard the stories about Kotsubo Tunnel since I was a kid. Whispers of blue lights, ghostly figures, and screams that echoed long after the living had left. My friends called it the Blue Ghost Tunnel, a name that sent shivers down my spine, even in daylight. They said it was cursed, that something terrible had happened there decades ago, and that the dead never truly left. I didn't believe in ghosts, not really, but I couldn't resist the pull of a good mystery. So, when my friend Sora suggested we drive out to Kotsubo one humid summer night, I agreed. It was a stupid idea, but curiosity is a cruel master. The first visit, the blue light. It was just past midnight when Sora, our friend Kenji, and I piled into my beat-up hatchback. The tunnel was about an hour's drive from our neighborhood, a narrow, forgotten passage carved into a forested hillside near the coast. The road to Kotsubo was desolate, lined with gnarled trees that seemed to lean inward as if guarding a secret. Kenji, sprawled in the back seat, was already trying to scare us, recounting the 1967 train crash that started it all. 13 people dead, their bodies mangled in the wreckage. They say their screams are still trapped in the tunnel, he said, his voice low and dramatic. Sora rolled her eyes, but I noticed her fingers tightening around her phone. When we reached the tunnel, it was worse than I'd imagined. The entrance loomed like a black mouth, the concrete stained with decades of grime and moss. The air was damp, carrying a faint metallic tang like rust or something worse. I parked just outside, my headlights cutting through the darkness but barely penetrating the tunnel's depths. "We're not actually going in, right?" Sora asked, her voice betraying a crack of fear. "Of course we are," Kenji said, already opening his door. "What's the point otherwise?" I hesitated, my hand lingering on the gear shift. The tunnel was pitch black, no lights inside, just an endless void that seemed to swallow sound itself. But I wasn't about to let Kenji call me a coward. "Fine," I said, grabbing my flashlight. "Let's make this quick." The moment we stepped inside, the temperature dropped. It wasn't just the dampness of the tunnel, it was a cold that seeped into your bones, sharp and unnatural. Our footsteps echoed, the sound bouncing off the walls in a way that felt too loud, too alive. Sora clung to my arm, her breath shaky. "This place is creepy," she whispered. "Relax," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "It's just a tunnel." Then we saw it, a faint blue glow flickering at the far end, like a distant star in the darkness. It wasn't steady like a light bulb. It pulsed, slow and deliberate, moving along the wall. "What the hell is that?" Kenji hissed, his bravado gone. I aimed my flashlight, but the beam seemed to weaken, as if the darkness was eating it. The blue light grew brighter, sharper, and then it moved. Fast, darting toward us like something alive. "Run!" Sora screamed, and we didn't argue. We sprinted back to the car, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I fumbled with the keys, the engine roaring to life just as the blue light reached the tunnel's entrance. In the rearview mirror, I swear I saw it take shape. A glowing hand, fingers outstretched, clawing at the air. Then it was gone, and we were speeding down the road, none of us speaking, until we were miles away. The second visit, the voices, I told myself I'd never go back. The memory of that blue light haunted my dreams for weeks, waking me in a cold sweat. But Kenji wouldn't let it go. "We didn't even see anything real," he insisted over coffee one afternoon. "It was Probably just a reflection or some weird gas leak. Sora wasn't convinced, and neither was I, but Kenji had a way of making you feel small if you backed down. So, 2 months later, we were back at Kotsubo, this time with a new addition. Aiko, Sora's cousin, who claimed she wasn't scared of anything. The tunnel looked the same, dark, damp, oppressive, but the air felt heavier this time, like it was pressing down on us. We'd brought better flashlights, the kind that could light up a football field, but even those seemed to falter inside. We walked deeper than before, maybe 50 meters in, when Aiko stopped dead. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I didn't, not at first. Then it came, a low murmur, like voices overlapping, too faint to make out words. It wasn't coming from any one direction. It was everywhere, vibrating through the walls. "It's just the wind," Kenji said, but his voice was tight. There was no wind. The air was still, suffocating. The murmurs grew louder, sharper, until I could pick out fragments. Cries, pleas, a name I couldn't quite catch. My skin prickled, and I felt watched, like eyes were boring into me from the darkness. "Let's go," Sora said, her voice barely audible. But Aiko, stubborn as ever, pushed forward. "I want to know what it is," she said, her flashlight sweeping the walls. That's when we saw them, dark stains splattered across the concrete like paint. They weren't there last time. They looked fresh, wet, and in the dim light, they glistened red. "That's not blood, is it?" Sora stammered. Before anyone could answer, the voices stopped. The silence was worse, thick, suffocating, like the tunnel was holding its breath. Then, from the darkness ahead, came a single, clear sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and getting closer. My flashlight caught nothing, just empty tunnel, but the footsteps didn't stop. They were heavy, uneven, like someone dragging a limp. Kenji grabbed Aiko's arm, and we ran, the footsteps chasing us, echoing louder and louder until we burst out into the night air. The car was 100 meters away, and we didn't stop until we were locked inside, peeling out onto the road. The third visit, the figure. I swore I was done. No more Kotsubo, no more chasing ghosts. But Aiko was obsessed. She'd been researching the tunnel online, digging up old forums and grainy videos. "There's something there," she told me over the phone. "People have been seeing things for decades. We can't just walk away." I wanted to say no, but there was a part of me, a stupid, reckless part, that needed answers too. Sora refused to come, and Kenji was hesitant, but Aiko's conviction was infectious. So, 3 weeks later, it was just the three of us again, standing at the tunnel's entrance at 2 a.m. This time, we brought a camera, one of those night vision ones Aiko borrowed from a friend. "If we see something, we're documenting it," she said, her voice steady, but her hands shaking as she adjusted the lens. The tunnel felt different this time. Angrier, if that makes sense. The air was thick, almost oily, and my flashlight flickered like it was running out of batteries, even though I just replaced them. We didn't see the blue light or hear voices, not at first. We walked deeper, maybe 200 meters, the deepest we'd ever gone. The tunnel seemed to stretch forever, the far end lost in darkness. Aiko was filming, narrating softly about the train crash and the rumors of murders in the 80s. Then the camera beeped, low battery, and shut off. "That's impossible," Aiko muttered. "It was fully charged." That's when I saw it, a figure standing just beyond the reach of my flashlight. It was human-shaped, but wrong, too tall, too thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It didn't move, just stood there, staring. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. "Do you see that?" I whispered. Kenji nodded, his face pale. Aiko fumbled with the camera, but it wouldn't turn on. The figure took a step forward, and my stomach lurched. Its movements were jerky, like a puppet on strings, and as it got closer, I saw its face, or where its face should have been. It was blank, smooth, like a mannequin, but its eyes were black pits, endless and hungry. "Haruka, run!" Kenji shouted, but my legs wouldn't move. The figure raised an arm, and I swear I felt something cold brush my face like fingers made of ice. Aiko grabbed my hand, yanking me back, and we ran, the figure's jerky steps echoing behind us. I don't know how we made it out, but when we reached the car, Aiko was sobbing, and Kenji was shaking so hard he couldn't speak. The camera was gone. She'd dropped it somewhere in the tunnel. The final visit, the hand. I couldn't sleep after that. The figure's blank face haunted me. Its eyeless gaze burned into my mind. Aiko was a wreck, refusing to talk about it, but Kenji was the worst. He stopped eating, stopped joking, just sat in his room staring at nothing. "We left something behind," he said one day, his voice hollow. "The camera. It's still in there." I told him to forget it, that no camera was worth going back, but he wouldn't listen. "It's not about the camera," he said. "It's about what's on it." Against every instinct, I agreed to one last trip. Just me and Kenji this time. Aiko wouldn't even answer her phone. We went at dusk, the sky bruised purple, the tunnel looking more like a grave than ever. Kenji was clutching a new flashlight, his knuckles white. "We find the camera and we leave," I said. He nodded, but his eyes were distant, like he was already somewhere else. Inside, the tunnel was silent. No voices, no blue lights, just that same oppressive cold. We found the camera halfway in, lying on the ground like it had been placed there. Kenji picked it up, his hands trembling, and turned it on. The screen flickered to life, showing the footage from our last visit. There was Aiko narrating, then the moment the camera died. But it didn't stop there. The footage kept going, showing darkness, then a face. The blank, eyeless face of the figure staring directly into the lens. It smiled, a horrible stretched grin, and the screen went black. Kenji dropped the camera, and that's when the blue light appeared again, brighter than ever, rushing toward us from the tunnel's depths. It wasn't just a light anymore. It was a hand, glowing, massive, its fingers curling like claws. I grabbed Kenji, but he was frozen, staring at the hand as it reached for him. "Haruka," he whispered, his voice breaking. "It knows my name." The hand lunged, and I swear it passed through him. Kenji screamed, a sound I'll never forget, and collapsed. I dragged him out, his body limp, the light chasing us until we hit the open air. I don't know how I got him into the car or how I drove us home, but when we got there, Kenji wasn't the same. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't look at me. The next day, he was gone. His parents said he'd left a note, something about needing to go back, but they never found him. I haven't been to Kotsubo since. Aiko moved away, and I don't know where she is now. The camera's footage is gone, too. When I checked it later, it was blank, like it had never recorded anything. Sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps outside my window, slow and uneven, like something dragging itself closer. I don't look out. I don't want to see what's there. But I know one thing. Kotsubo Tunnel isn't just a place. It's alive, and it remembers us. Story 4. Echoes in the Bone Vault. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient decay as I descended the narrow spiral staircase into the Paris catacombs. My flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows on the rough-hewn walls. I'd come here chasing a story, a whispered tale from a street vendor about voices in the tunnels that didn't belong to the living. My name's Elise, a freelance journalist with a knack for finding the unsettling. I'd been to abandoned asylums and crumbling castles, but nothing prepared me for this. The staircase ended abruptly, spitting me out into a low-ceilinged tunnel. My boots crunched on loose gravel, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. A faded sign read, "Arrête! C'est ici l'Empire de la Mort! Stop! This is the Empire of the Dead." Beyond it, walls of human bones rose on either side, femurs stacked like firewood, skulls grinning in endless rows. I shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of 6 million dead pressing in around me. I'd paid off a maintenance worker to let me in after hours past the tourist routes. The official tours only showed a fraction of the 320 kilometers of tunnels. But I wanted the real thing, the unmapped, forbidden stretches where the stories lived. My recorder clicked on, capturing the faint drip of water somewhere deep in the dark. I spoke softly, narrating for my podcast. October 28th, 11:47 p.m. I'm in the catacombs, beyond the public paths. If the rumors are true, this is where the whispers start. The first hour was uneventful. I followed a narrow passage, my flashlight carving a weak circle of light. The air grew heavier, like breathing through wet cloth. I traced my hand along the wall, feeling the smooth curve of a skull under my fingers, and yanked my hand back. "Focus, Elise," I muttered. I wasn't here to scare myself, silly. I was here for proof. Then I heard it, a low murmur like a conversation just out of reach. I froze, tilting my head to listen. My recorder whirred softly, but the sound wasn't coming from it. It was ahead, echoing off the bones. I checked my map, a crumpled photocopy of a 19th century quarry plan. The tunnel split 3 ways up ahead. The murmur seemed to come from the left, faint but insistent, like someone whispering my name. I hesitated. The vendor's story echoed in my mind. Explorers who followed voices in the catacombs often didn't come back. But I wasn't some thrill seeker. I had a job to do. I stepped into the left tunnel, the beam of my flashlight trembling slightly. The passage narrowed, forcing me to duck under jagged outcrops. The whispers grew clearer, weaving in and out of the silence. Not words exactly, but a cadence, like a chant with no meaning. My pulse quickened. I rounded a corner and stopped dead. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, its walls a mosaic of bones. In the center, a single skull sat on the floor, its empty socket staring straight at me. It hadn't been there a moment ago. I was sure of it. I'd have noticed. I stepped closer, my breath shallow. The whispers stopped. Silence clamped down, heavy and absolute. My flashlight flickered again, then steadied. I reached for the skull, my hand shaking, but before I could touch it, a sharp crack echoed behind me. I spun around, sweeping the light across the tunnel. Nothing, just bones and darkness. But the air felt different now, charged, like the moment before a storm. "Get it together," I whispered, turning back to the skull. It was gone. The floor was empty, just a patch of damp stone. My heart slammed against my ribs. I checked my recorder, still running, still picking up nothing but my own breathing. I backed out of the chamber, my eyes darting to every shadow. The whispers started again, now behind me, pulling me back the way I'd come. I should have turned around. I should have followed the map back to the staircase. But curiosity is a cruel master. I followed the sound, deeper into the maze. The tunnels twisted and branched, each one looking like the last. My map was useless now. None of these passages matched its lines. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, like a crowd murmuring just out of sight. I caught fragments, bien, ici, perdu, words I could almost understand, though my French was rusty. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt slippery down here. My flashlight dimmed, the batteries draining faster than they should have. I swapped them out, but the new ones barely helped. The light was weaker, the shadows thicker. I stumbled into another chamber, this one larger, with a low stone slab in the center. Carved into it was a name, Philibert Aspert. My stomach twisted. I knew that name. The hospital doorman who'd vanished in 1793, found 11 years later with his keyring clutched in his skeletal hand. His tombstone was supposed to be near the public routes, not here. I touched the slab, tracing the carved letters. The whispers surged, a chorus now filling the chamber. Elise, Viens, my name, clear as day. I stumbled back, my flashlight sputtering. The beam caught something in the corner, a flicker of movement, like a shadow peeling itself off the wall. I swung the light around, but it was gone. My recorder beeped, its battery low despite being fresh that morning. I ran. The tunnels blurred past, bones rattling as my shoulder brushed the walls. The whispers chased me, weaving through the dark. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to move. My map fell from my pocket, but I didn't stop to pick it up. The air grew colder, the walls closer. I turned a corner and slammed into a dead end, a solid wall of skulls, their empty eyes staring. I pressed my hands against the bones, searching for a way through. The whispers were everywhere now, loud and overlapping, a cacophony of voices that weren't human. My flashlight died with a final flicker, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, but the screen wouldn't light. Panic clawed at my chest. I pounded on the wall, and a single skull fell, clattering to the ground. Then I saw it, a faint glow deep in the eye socket of a skull still embedded in the wall. It pulsed, soft and blue like a heartbeat. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the bone. The wall shuddered, and a section of it swung inward, revealing a new tunnel. The glow faded, but the whispers urged me forward. Viens, viens. I stepped through, my hands shaking. The tunnel was different, smoother, older, with no bones lining the walls. The air was stale, untouched. My boots echoed, the only sound now. The whispers had stopped. I walked for what felt like miles, the tunnel sloping downward. My phone was useless, my recorder dead. I was alone with the dark and the weight of the earth above me. At last, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling was lost in shadow, but the walls glowed faintly, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when I looked at them. In the center stood a stone pillar etched with names, hundreds, thousands, scratched into the rock. I saw Philibert Aspert near the base, and above it, fresher, impossibly, Elise Moreau. My name. I backed away, my breath hitching. The whispers returned, soft at first, then rising to a scream. Shadows moved along the walls, not cast by any light. They reached for me, long and thin like fingers. I turned to run, but the tunnel I'd come through was gone. Just a blank wall, seamless and cold. I don't know how long I've been here. My phone's dead, my flashlight gone. I write this on the last pages of my notebook, my pencil dull but still legible. The whispers never stop now, calling me deeper. I see Philibert sometimes, a shadow with a glinting key ring watching from the dark. There are others too, shapes that move when I blink, faces that form in the patterns on the walls. I don't think I'll find the way out. The catacombs don't let go. If you're reading this, don't follow the voices. Don't come looking for me. The bones are listening, and they're hungry for more. Story 5, The Bloody Pit. The air was thick with damp, and the acrid sting of gunpowder as I stepped into the mouth of the Hoosac tunnel. My boots crunched against the loose gravel, echoing faintly in the cavernous dark. It was 1865, and I'd been hired as a laborer on this cursed project, burrowing through the unyielding Berkshire Mountains. The locals called it the Bloody Pit, and I was about to learn why. My first day was a blur of sweat and shouting. The crew was a rough bunch, their faces smeared with soot and fear. They spoke in hushed tones about the tunnel's appetite for lives. I dismissed it as superstition, tales to spook greenhorns like me. But that night, as the sun dipped below the ridge, I felt it. A cold that wasn't just the mountain air, a weight that pressed against my chest. The tunnel seemed to breathe, exhaling a faint, mournful sigh. It started with Ned Brinkman and Billy Nash. They were blasting experts, cocky and quick with a laugh. Alongside Ringo Kelly, they were tasked with setting a nitroglycerin charge deep in the shaft. I was hauling rock nearby when I heard the shout to clear out. The three of them lit the fuse and ran, but something went wrong. The explosion roared too soon, a deafening crack that shook the earth. When the dust settled, Ned and Billy were gone, buried under a tomb of jagged stone. Ringo somehow made it out, his face pale as death, eyes wide with something beyond fear. He didn't speak, just stumbled into the night. The crew whispered that the mountain had claimed its due. I tried to shake it off, but the next morning, Ringo was nowhere to be found. Work continued, though the men moved slower, their glances darting to the shadows. A year later, they found him, or what was left of him. 2 miles into the unfinished tunnel, Ringo's body lay crumpled, his neck bruised as if strangled by unseen hands. The crew swore it was Ned and Billy, their spirits clawing from the grave for revenge. I laughed it off, but I stopped lingering near the tunnel's mouth after dusk. The stories grew. Men swore they heard groans in the dark, not the creak of rock or the drip of water, but human sounds, pained, desperate. I kept my head down, focused on my work, but the tunnel had a way of pulling you in. One night in 1868, I was assigned to a late shift, carting tools to the far end of the shaft. The air grew colder the deeper I went, my lantern casting weak flickers against the damp walls. Then I heard it, a low, guttural moan, like a man in agony. I froze, my breath catching. "Who's there?" I called, my voice swallowed by the dark. No answer, just another moan. Closer now. I swung my lantern, but the light revealed nothing but stone. My heart hammered as I backed away, nearly tripping over the tracks. I didn't stop until I saw the faint glow of the entrance. Word spread, and soon no one wanted the night shifts. The foreman brought in Paul Travers, a mechanical engineer with a sharp mind, and no patience for ghost stories. He marched into the tunnel with a supervisor, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies. 2 miles in, they stopped to listen. Travers later said they both heard it, a man's voice, sobbing in pain, clear as day, though the tunnel was empty. He tried to explain it as an echo, but his hand shook as he told the story. Then came the explosion. A gas pocket ignited, a fireball that tore through the shaft, killing 13 men. The tunnel was flooded, the bodies trapped beneath water and rubble. The villagers started seeing things after that. Vague shapes moving through the mist, pickaxes glinting in the moonlight, though no one was there. I saw them too, one snowy night. Faint figures trudging along the ridge above the tunnel. I blinked and they were gone, but my sleep was haunted for weeks. The tunnel's hunger didn't stop. In June 1872, Dr. Clifford Owen and his colleague James McKinstry ventured inside, chasing rumors of strange lights. They were men of science, not easily spooked. Deep in the shaft, they heard cries, mournful, echoing. Then a dim blue glow appeared drifting toward them. My blood ran cold when they described it. A headless figure, glowing faintly, hovering before their lamps. It vanished as quickly as it came, leaving them stumbling back to the surface, their faces ashen. I thought I could avoid the tunnel's pull, keep my head down, and collect my pay. But it found me too. One evening, as I stacked tools near the entrance, a voice whispered my name. It wasn't a shout or a call. It was close, like a breath against my ear. I spun around, but no one was there. The air grew heavy, and my lantern flickered. Against every instinct, I stepped inside, drawn by something I couldn't name. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices urging me deeper. I don't know how long I walked, but I woke up on a riverbank, my clothes torn, my body bruised, with no memory of how I got there. They said I'd been missing for 3 days. The tunnel was completed eventually, but its shadow never lifted. Even now, years later, I hear stories from those who dare to enter. They speak of icy drafts that cut through coats, lights that move with no source, and whispers that know your name. I've never gone back, but sometimes in the quiet of night, I hear the tunnel sigh, calling me to return. Story 6. The Sendagaya Tunnel. My name is Rio, and I chase shadows for a living. Not the kind cast by sunlight, but the ones that linger in places people avoid after dark. Tokyo's got no shortage of those, and I've walked most of them. Alleys that twist like veins, stairwells that echo with whispers no one can place. But the Sendagaya Tunnel? That one's different. It's got a reputation that clings like damp rot, and I'd been putting it off for years. They say a woman in white haunts it, her blood staining the air itself. Drivers swear heavy thumps hit their cars when she appears, like something's trying to claw its way in. I don't believe in ghosts, not really, but I believe in fear, and fear's what brought me to the tunnel's mouth just after midnight. The air was thick that night, heavy with the kind of humidity that makes your clothes stick to your skin. Shibuya's neon glow faded behind me as I approached the underpass, its concrete maw lit by flickering orange halogen lights. The tunnel stretched longer than it had any right to, a gray artery burrowing beneath a cemetery nobody talks about. I adjusted my backpack, checked my recorder, and stepped inside. The world outside muted instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. All I could hear was the faint hum of my own breath and the scuff of my shoes on the pavement. It was colder than it should have been. Not just the chill of concrete walls, but something sharper, like stepping into a freezer. I zipped up my jacket and kept walking, the lights casting long, jagged shadows that danced just out of sync with my steps. The rumors were already crawling up my spine, stories of the woman, her white dress, her eyes that didn't blink. I shook it off. I'd done this before. Old tunnels always feel wrong. It's just the way sound bends, the way air stagnates. That's what I told myself. Halfway through, the silence broke. A single drop of water hit the ground somewhere ahead, loud as a gunshot in the stillness. Then another drip, drip, drip. I froze, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The ceiling was dry, not a leak in sight. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to move, one foot in front of the other. The dripping followed, irregular, like someone was tapping a finger against the walls. I told myself it was pipes, condensation, anything normal. But the cold deepened, and the air felt heavy, like it was pressing back against me. I don't know when I first felt it, maybe 100 meters in, but I wasn't alone. Not in any obvious way, no footsteps or shadows, just a prickle on the back of my neck, like eyes boring into me from the dark. I swung my flashlight around, the beam catching nothing but cracked tiles and faded graffiti. My heart was hammering now, and I hated it. I'm not some rookie spooked by creaks and drafts, but this was different. It was like the tunnel itself was watching, waiting for me to slip. I kept moving, faster now, the exit a faint glow in the distance. The dripping had stopped, but the silence was worse, thick, suffocating. My flashlight flickered just for a second, and I cursed under my breath. Batteries were fresh. It shouldn't have done that. I shook it, and the beam steadied. But then I saw it. On the wall, half hidden among spray-painted tags and grime, was a piece of paper. Crumpled, yellowed, pinned to the concrete like it had been there for years. I don't know why I stopped. Every instinct screamed to keep going. But I reached out and pulled it free. It was a map, hand-drawn, messy, with lines that jagged like a child's scribble. But the text wasn't Japanese. It was Korean, scrawled in black ink that looked too fresh for the paper's age. I don't read Korean, but I recognized the shape of Seoul's subway system, the stations marked with hurried X6. One was circled in red, the ink bleeding into the paper like a wound. My hand shook as I stuffed it into my pocket. Who leaves a map of Seoul in a Tokyo tunnel? And why here, in this forsaken place? The air shifted, not a breeze, but a pressure, like something had stepped into the space behind me. I didn't look back. Couldn't. My legs moved on their own, carrying me toward the exit, the map burning a hole in my pocket. The lights flickered again, and for a split second, I thought I saw her. A flash of white in the corner of my eye, gone when I turned. My breath caught, and I broke into a run, the tunnel stretching longer with every step. The exit was there, so close, but it felt like the walls were closing in, the air thickening, until I could barely breathe. I burst out into the night, gasping, the city's hum crashing back around me. I didn't stop until I was blocks away, my hands still trembling as I pulled out the map. It felt wrong, like it carried the tunnel's cold with it. I should have thrown it away, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I went home, locked my door, and spread it out on my desk. Under the light, the red circle stood out like a scream. I sent a photo to a friend who reads Korean. Hours later, he called me back, his voice tight. "It's a map to Dobong Station," he said. "In Seoul, the note says, She's waiting. I didn't sleep that night. The map sat on my desk, and every creak in my apartment felt like the tunnel's drip echoing back. I told myself it was just a prank, some weird art project left by a bored kid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I brought something out with me. The next day, I did what I always do when a story gets under my skin. I dug deeper. Dobong Station wasn't just any subway stop. 10 years ago, a woman had died there, hit by a train under murky circumstances. The reports called it an accident, but locals swore she'd been pushed. Her white dress catching on the tracks as she fell. No one was ever charged. I found grainy forum posts claiming her spirit lingered, seen by late-night commuters who felt the same dread I had in Sendagaya. The parallels were too neat, too uncanny. A woman in white, a tunnel, a death. And now this map, linking two cities, two hauntings, across an ocean. I should have stopped there. Any sane person would have. But I'm not sane, not when it comes to stories like this. I booked a flight to Seoul. Dobong Station was calling, and I had to know why. The subway station was nothing special at first glance. Crowded, noisy, smelling of stale coffee and metal. But as I descended the platform stairs, the air changed, just like in Sendagaya. Heavy, cold, wrong. It was late, the crowds thinning, and I stood near the edge of the platform, the map clutched in my hand. The red circle marked this exact spot. I waited, watching the trains come and go, their headlights cutting through the dimness like eyes. Then I heard it, a drip, slow, deliberate, echoing from the tunnel beyond the platform. My mouth went dry. I turned, half expecting to see water pooling on the tracks, but there was nothing, just the dark mouth of the subway tunnel yawning wide. The dripping grew louder, closer, and I felt it again. That weight, that sense of being watched. I backed away from the edge, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. A train roared in, and I got on, telling myself I was done. But as the doors closed, I saw something in the tunnel's shadow, a flicker of white, too quick to be sure. The train lurched forward, and I gripped the pole, my reflection in the window pale and hollow. When I checked my pocket, the map was gone. I tore through my bag, my jacket, but it was nowhere. Panic clawed at me. Had I dropped it? Had someone taken it? Or had it never been real? Back in Tokyo, I tried to move on. I wrote up my Sendagaya story, left out the map, called it a creepy experience and nothing more. But the dripping followed me. Not every night, but often enough. Faint, irregular, coming from nowhere. My apartment felt smaller, the shadows sharper. I started avoiding tunnels, subways, any place where the light didn't reach. But last week, I found something that broke me. I was cleaning out my desk, shoving old notes into a box, when a piece of paper fluttered to the floor. It was the map. Same crumpled edges, same Korean scrawl, same red circle. Only now there was something new, a second circle drawn in black around a different station. I looked it up. It was in Osaka. Another tunnel, another set of rumors about a woman in white. I haven't gone yet. I don't know if I will. But last night, I heard the dripping again, louder, closer, like it was coming from inside the walls. And when I checked the map this morning, there was a new mark. Not in Osaka, not in Seoul, but here, in Tokyo. A station I pass every day. I don't know what's waiting for me there. I don't know if it's her or something else, something that's been following me since that night in Sendagaya. But I know one thing. I'm running out of time. Story 7. The Sewer Man. Chronicles. My name is Caleb, And I'm a night shift maintenance worker for this city's sewer system. Down here, it's just me, the damp walls, and the endless gurgle of water snaking through the tunnels. I've been doing this job for 6 years, long enough to know every creak and echo in the dark. The sewers are a maze, a forgotten world beneath the city's pulse. Most people don't think about what's under their feet. I didn't either until I met him. It started 3 months ago, on a routine inspection in the older tunnels beneath the warehouse district. These pipes are ancient, laid down when the city was just cobblestone and gas lamps. My flashlight beam danced across the slick bricks, catching the glint of water and the scuttle of rats. The air was thick, sour with decay, but that's normal down here. What wasn't normal was the sound, a faint, rhythmic tap, like fingers drumming on metal. I froze, tilting my head to listen. The tap stopped, replaced by a low, wet chuckle that seemed to crawl up the walls. "Hello?" I called, my voice bouncing off the stone. No answer, just the drip-drip of a distant leak. I shook it off. Sewers play tricks on your ears. But as I moved deeper, my boots splashing through shallow sludge, I felt it. A prickle on my neck, like someone was watching. I spun around, flashlight sweeping the tunnel. Nothing but shadows. I told myself it was fatigue, the late hour messing with my head. But when I turned back, my light caught something. A pair of eyes, glinting like coins in the dark, just beyond the beam's reach. They blinked and were gone. I didn't report it. Who would believe me? I went home, showered off the sewer stink, and tried to sleep. But the next night, it got worse. The second incident came a week later in a different section of the tunnels near the river. I was checking a clogged grate when I heard it again. That same chuckle, closer this time, like it was just behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding, but the tunnel was empty. My radio crackled, spitting static, though I hadn't touched it. Then, clear as day, a voice whispered through the speaker. "Stay too long, Caleb. Stay too long." My name. It knew my name. I dropped the radio, the plastic clattering against the concrete. I grabbed it and bolted for the nearest manhole, my breath ragged. When I climbed out into the cool night air, I checked the radio. It was off, battery dead. I told myself it was a prank, some co-worker messing with me. But no one else was scheduled in the tunnels that night. At home, things started to go wrong. My sink backed up, spewing black water that smelled like the sewers. My cat, Misha, vanished, her food bowl untouched, her collar left on the kitchen floor. I searched the neighborhood, called her name until my throat was raw, but she was gone. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it, a faint tapping from the drain in my bathroom. I didn't dare check. The third time, I saw him. It was a month later, in the deepest part of the system, where the tunnels widen into caverns that haven't been mapped since the 1800s. I was sent to investigate a pressure drop, a job that meant hours alone in the dark. The air was colder here, the walls slick with something thicker than water. My flashlight flickered, though I'd just replaced the batteries. I cursed, smacking it against my palm, when I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, splashing through the muck behind me. I turned, and there he was, tall, impossibly tall, his head nearly brushing the tunnel ceiling. He wore a tattered coat, black as the shadows, and a cloth wrapped around his face, leaving only his eyes and a twisted grin visible. His teeth gleamed, too sharp, too many. My flashlight dimmed, then flared, and in that moment he moved, slipping sideways into a side tunnel, silent as smoke. I stood there frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then from the darkness, his voice came, low and mocking. "Run, Caleb. Run while you can." I ran. I didn't stop until I was out, gasping under a streetlight, my hands shaking so bad I could barely call my supervisor. I told him I was sick, took a week off. But the sewers followed me. My apartment's pipes groaned at night, spitting a sludge. My dreams were filled with his grin, those eyes boring into me. When I went back to work, I requested surface jobs, anything to stay out of the tunnels. But the city's short-staffed, and they sent me back down. Last night was the worst. I was in a narrow tunnel checking a valve when my flashlight died completely. The darkness was absolute, pressing against my skin. I fumbled for my spare, but before I could find it, I heard him breathing, slow and deep, inches from my face. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting the wall, and then a light flared, not mine, but his. A faint, sickly glow from somewhere under his coat, illuminating his silhouette. He was closer now, his grin wider, his eyes locked on mine. He didn't move, just stood there, watching as the glow pulsed like a heartbeat. I don't know how I got out. I remember running, slipping, scraping my hands on the walls. When I reached the surface, I found my flashlight in my pocket, working perfectly. But there was something else, a small, wet object in my tool bag. I pulled it out, my stomach twisting. It was Misha's collar, crusted with dried sludge, and scratched into the leather was a single word, mine. I quit today. I told my boss I'm done, no explanation. But as I write this, my sink is gurgling again, and the air smells faintly of the sewers. There's a tapping in the walls, soft but persistent. I don't know what he wants or why he's following me, but I know one thing. The sewer man isn't just a story. He's real, and he's not done with me. I moved to a new apartment thinking distance would help. It didn't. The first night, my new place's pipes rattled and water trickled from the faucet, black, oily, reeking of the tunnels. I called a plumber, but he found nothing wrong. The next day, I found footprints in the hallway, wet, too large, leading to my door and stopping. I started sleeping with the lights on, but it doesn't matter. Last night, I woke to scratching under the floorboards, and when I looked, a single eye stared up through a crack, glinting in the dark. I'm writing this because I need someone to know. If you're reading this, stay out of the sewers. Don't go near manholes. Don't ignore strange sounds from your drains. He's down there, waiting. And once he sees you, he doesn't let go. Story 8. The Ghost Train of Astor Place. The air in Astor Place station hung heavy, thick with the damp musk of old concrete and the faint metallic tang of the tracks. It was 12:47 a.m., and I was alone on the platform, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence. The last 6 train had roared through 20 minutes ago, leaving me stranded, my phone dead, and the streets above too far to walk in the biting November chill. I'd missed my stop after a late shift at the diner, and now I was stuck, waiting for the next train that might not come for another half hour. The station was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every drip, every creak. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long, flickering shadows across the tiled walls. I paced, my sneakers scuffing against the grime-stained platform, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. That's when I heard it, a low, distant rumble, not like the usual screech of an approaching train, but softer, almost deliberate, like a sigh from the tunnel's depths. I froze, squinting into the black maw of the tunnel. The rumble grew louder, accompanied by a faint, rhythmic clatter like wheels on tracks, but slower, older. Then, from the darkness, a light flickered, not the harsh white of a modern subway headlamp, but a warm, golden glow, like candles behind smoked glass. A train slid into view, and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a 6 train. It wasn't any train I'd ever seen. The cars were ancient, their exteriors a deep, polished green, with brass fittings glinting under the station's dim lights. The windows were tall and arched, framed in dark wood, and the whole thing moved with an unnatural grace, gliding silently to a stop. No digital display announced its route, no markings at all, just a faint, ornate script along the side that I couldn't quite read in the gloom. The doors, wooden, not metal, hissed open, revealing an interior that didn't belong in any subway I knew. Polished leather couches lined the walls, their deep burgundy gleaming softly. Silk curtains, heavy and cream-colored, swayed gently as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. A pot-belly stove glowed in the corner, its faint crackle the only sound breaking the stillness. The air carried a strange scent, charred wood and something sharper, like pipe tobacco, thick and old. I stood rooted to the platform, my heart pounding. No conductor called out. No passenger stepped off or on. The train just waited, its open doors beckoning like an invitation I hadn't asked for. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, to wait for the next real train, but the cold was biting into my bones, and something about that warm, glowing interior pulled at me like a memory I couldn't place. I stepped forward, hesitating at the threshold. The platform behind me felt emptier than before, the station's hum now a distant whisper. I glanced back, half expecting to see someone, a janitor, a late-night commuter, but there was nothing, just me and this impossible train. I stepped inside. The doors slid shut behind me with a soft thud, and the train lurched forward, smooth and silent. The interior was even more surreal up close. The leather was impossibly soft under my fingertips, the wood paneling carved with intricate patterns, vines, leaves, faces that seemed to shift when I looked too long. The stove's heat warmed my hands, but the air felt heavy, like I was breathing through a veil. I sat on one of the couches, my reflection distorted in the polished brass fixtures. The windows showed only darkness, no tunnel walls, no stations, just an endless void. I don't know how long we moved. Time felt slippery, like it was bending around the train. I stood to explore, my footsteps muffled on a thick patterned rug. At the far end of the car, a small table held a single object, an old pocket watch, its face cracked, hands frozen at 1:13. I reached for it, but the moment my fingers brushed the cold metal, the train shuddered and the lights flickered. A voice, not loud but close, like a whisper in my ear, said, "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, my pulse hammering. No one was there. The car was still empty, the stove still crackling, but the air felt tighter, like it was pressing against my chest. I backed toward the door, my hand fumbling for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The train picked up speed, the clatter of the wheels growing louder, more insistent. Then, through the window, I saw it. A station. Not Astor Place, not any station I recognized. The platform was deserted, its tiles cracked and moss-covered, lit by gas lamps that flickered like dying stars. The train didn't stop. It slowed just enough for me to see the faded sign, Belmont Station. The name tugged at something in my memory, but before I could place it, the train plunged back into darkness. The watch on the table ticked once, loudly, then stopped. I don't know when I fell asleep, or if I did. I remember sitting back on the couch, my eyes heavy, the rhythmic sway of the train lulling me into a haze. When I opened my eyes, I was still in the car, but something was different. The air was colder, the stove's fire reduced to embers. The curtains hung limp, their silk frayed at the edges. And I wasn't alone. A figure sat across from me, half hidden in shadow. He was dressed in an old-fashioned suit, high collar, vest, a pocket chain, glinting faintly. His face was obscured, but his hands, resting on his knees, were pale, almost translucent. He didn't move, didn't speak, but I felt his gaze heavy and unyielding. "Who are you?" I managed, my voice barely a croak. He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to the watch on the table. Its hands were moving now, spinning backward faster and faster until they blurred. The train lurched again and the windows flashed with light. Another station, this one even older, its platform crowded with shadows. Not people, not exactly, just shapes, flickering in and out, their faces featureless but their eyes burning into me. I stood, stumbling toward the door, but the man was suddenly there, blocking my path. He didn't touch me, didn't speak, but his presence was like a weight, pinning me in place. The train slowed, and through the window I saw Astor Place again, but not as I knew it. The tiles were cleaner, the lights softer, and the platform was empty except for a single figure in a long coat watching the train approach. The doors opened. I lunged for them, my heart in my throat, but the man grabbed my wrist. His touch was ice, burning into my skin. "Not yet," he whispered, and the door slammed shut. The train surged forward, and the station vanished. Days passed, or maybe hours. Time didn't work right in that car. The man was gone, but I felt him everywhere, his presence lingering in the creak of the floor, the flicker of the stove. The watch kept ticking, its hands now moving forward, then backward, then stopping altogether. Each time the train passed a station, it was different. Some ancient, some impossibly modern, some crumbling into ruin. I saw faces in the windows, hands pressed against the glass, but no one ever boarded. I tried everything to escape. I pried at the doors, smashed the windows, but they wouldn't break. I shouted until my voice gave out, but the train just kept moving, its rhythm unbroken. The air grew heavier, the tobacco scent stronger, until it felt like I was choking on it. The stove flared brighter, then dimmed, like it was breathing with the train. One night, or what felt like night, the train stopped. Not at a station, just in the middle of the tunnel, the darkness outside absolute. The doors opened, revealing nothing but a void. I hesitated, my legs trembling, but the man's voice echoed again. "You shouldn't be here." This time, it wasn't a warning, it was a command. I stepped out. The platform was Astor Place, but not the one I'd left. The tiles were pristine, the air warm and thick, with the scent of coal and oil. A clock on the wall read 1:13 a.m., October 27th, 1904. People milled about, men in bowler hats, women in long skirts, their faces blurred like old photographs. I tried to speak, to ask where I was, but no one looked at me. It was like I wasn't there. Then I saw the train again, waiting at the far end of the platform. Not the one I'd ridden, but another, identical. Its doors open, its interior glowing. A man stood beside it. The same man from the car, his face still hidden. He raised a hand, beckoning. I ran. I don't know how long I ran, through tunnels that twisted and turned, past stations that flickered in and out of existence. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I kept going, driven by the fear that if I stopped, I'd be back on that train, trapped forever. When I finally stumbled onto a platform, I recognized it was Astor Place, the real one, cold and grimy and familiar. The clock read 1:32 a.m., November 17th, 2023. My phone was still dead, my clothes reeked of tobacco, and my wrist bore a faint red mark where the man had grabbed me. I collapsed onto a bench, my hands shaking, the echo of the train's rumble still in my ears. I haven't taken the subway since. I walk everywhere now, no matter how far, but sometimes late at night, I hear it. The faint clatter of wheels, the creak of an old car pulling into a station that shouldn't exist. I smell the tobacco, feel the cold grip on my wrist, and I know deep down that the train is still out there, waiting for me to board again. Story 9. The Ghost of Tunnelton's Big Tunnel. The Big Tunnel in Tunnelton, Indiana, stretches 4,723 feet through the earth, a dark artery of brick and stone that once held the title of the nation's longest rail tunnel. Its shadowed depths, carved in the late 1800s, were meant to carry trains and progress. But something else lingers there now, something that refuses to leave. The locals don't talk about it much, not unless you press them, and even then their voices drop to a whisper. They'll tell you about Henry Dixon, the night watchman who met his end in 1908, and how the tunnel hasn't been the same since. It was a cold November night when Henry Dixon, a wiry man with a lantern and a sense of duty, walked into the big tunnel. He'd been hired to patrol the tracks, to keep vagrants and troublemakers out of the tunnel's endless dark. That night, the air was thick with frost, and the stars above Tunnelton were sharp as knives. Henry's lantern cast a weak glow, barely enough to push back the blackness that seemed to swallow sound itself. He was halfway through the tunnel, his boots crunching on the gravel ballast, when he heard it, a muffled cry, sharp and desperate, echoing from deeper within. Henry froze. The sound wasn't right. It wasn't the usual drip of water or the groan of settling earth. It was human, a woman's voice, maybe two, pleading. His grip tightened on the lantern, and he moved toward the sound, his breath visible in the chilled air. The tunnel seemed to tighten around him, the brick walls pressing in as if they resented his presence. Then he saw them, two figures struggling against a group of shadowed men, their faces obscured in the gloom. "Stop!" Henry shouted, his voice bouncing off the walls, but the men didn't flinch. One turned, his eyes glinting like a predator's, and Henry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. He never made it out. The next morning, a rail worker found Henry's body slumped at the tunnel's mouth. His skull was cracked, blood pooling beneath him, his lantern still burning faintly beside his outstretched hand. The light hadn't gone out, as if it refused to let the darkness win. The women were gone, vanished without a trace, and the gang was never found. The murder was a mystery that Tunnelton's small police force couldn't unravel. No witnesses, no leads, just Henry's body and the lantern that burned until its oil ran dry. The tunnel was sealed not long after, its entrances boarded up, but that didn't stop the stories. People said the big tunnel had changed that night, as if Henry's blood had soaked into its stones and given it a pulse of its own. Urban explorers, drawn by the thrill of the forbidden, started sneaking inside, their flashlights cutting through the suffocating dark. They came back with tales that made the townsfolk shudder. The tunnel wasn't just empty, it was alive in its own terrible way. The first encounter, Jake Harmon, was 19 when he decided to explore the big tunnel. It was 2013, and he'd heard the stories from his older brother, who swore he'd seen something move in the tunnel's shadows years before. Jake didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in proving a point. Armed with a flashlight, a GoPro, and a backpack with some water and snacks, he slipped through a gap in the boards at the tunnel's west entrance. It was a humid summer night, the kind where the air sticks to your skin and the cicadas were screaming outside. But the moment Jake stepped inside, the world went silent. The tunnel smelled of damp earth and something metallic like old blood. His flashlight beam danced across the brick walls, revealing graffiti tags and patches of mold. He laughed to himself, trying to shake the unease that settled in his chest. "Just a tunnel," he muttered, his voice swallowed by the dark. He walked deeper, his footsteps echoing like a heartbeat. The GoPro strapped to his chest hummed softly, recording everything. At the halfway mark, Jake stopped to adjust his light. That's when he heard it, a faint whisper, like someone breathing a word just out of reach. He swung the flashlight around, but there was nothing, just the endless curve of the tunnel. "Hello?" he called, his voice sharper now. No answer. He checked the GoPro screen, but it showed only static, even though the battery was full. Shaking his head, he pressed on. Then came the footsteps. Not his own. These were heavier, deliberate, coming from behind him. Jake spun, his flashlight beam slicing through the dark, but the tunnel was empty. His heart pounded, and he told himself it was just the echo of his own steps. But the sound came again, closer this time, like boots crunching on gravel. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was only silence, thick and oppressive, like the tunnel was holding its breath. Then a voice, low, rasping, barely audible, whispered, "Dixon." Jake's blood went cold. He didn't wait to hear it again. He ran, his flashlight bobbing wildly, the tunnel's walls blurring past him. The footsteps followed, faster now, matching his pace. He didn't look back. When he finally burst out into the night air, he was gasping, his shirt soaked with sweat. The GoPro had shut off, its footage corrupted, showing nothing but static and a single frame, a faint, glowing orb near the tunnel's mouth, like a lantern burning in the dark. Jake never went back. He told his story online, and it spread like wildfire among paranormal forums. Most called it fake, but a few locals reached out, their messages short and grim. "You're lucky you got out." The second incident, 2 years later, in 2015, a group of 3 friends, Lila, Marcus, and Ethan, decided to test the tunnel's legend. They were college students, skeptical but bored, looking for a thrill. They'd heard about Jake's story and laughed it off, convinced it was just a prank. Armed with flashlights, a digital recorder for EVP sessions, and a drone with a camera, they pried open the east entrance and slipped inside. The tunnel was colder than they expected, the air heavy with a stillness that made their skin prickle. Lila, the group's unofficial leader, kept her flashlight steady, her voice light, as she narrated for the recorder. "We're in the big tunnel, looking for Henry Dixon's ghost. So far, just a lot of nothing." Marcus snorted, but Ethan was quiet, his eyes darting to the shadows. They set up the drone, its tiny propellers buzzing as it hovered down the tunnel. The live feed on Marcus's phone showed the same brick walls, the same graffiti, but something felt off. The drone's light flickered and the feed glitched, showing brief flashes of a figure, a man in old-fashioned clothes, holding a lantern. "What the hell was that?" Marcus whispered, but before anyone could answer, the drone crashed, its signal lost. Lila started the EVP session, holding the recorder out into the dark. "Is anyone here?" she asked, her voice steady despite the growing tension. Silence. Then a faint knock echoed from deeper in the tunnel, sharp and deliberate, like someone rapping on the brick. Ethan grabbed Lila's arm. "That wasn't us," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They waited, the recorder still running. Another knock, closer this time. Then another and another, a slow, rhythmic tapping that seemed to come from all directions. Lila's flashlight flickered, and Marcus swore under his breath. "We should go," Ethan said, but Lila shook her head. "One more question." She spoke into the recorder. "Who are you?" The air grew colder, the temperature dropping so fast their breath clouded. The recorder crackled, and a faint voice came through, distorted but unmistakable. "Henry, help me." Marcus dropped his flashlight, plunging them into near darkness. The knocking stopped, replaced by footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming from the direction of the tunnel's mouth. Lila grabbed the recorder and shoved it into her pocket, her bravado gone. "Run!" she hissed, and they did, stumbling over the uneven ground, their flashlights barely cutting through the dark. The footsteps followed, faster now, accompanied by a low guttural sound that wasn't quite a voice. They burst out of the tunnel, collapsing onto the grass outside. When they played back the recorder later, the EVP was clear. "Henry, help me," followed by a series of knocks that hadn't been audible in the moment. The drone was gone, lost somewhere in the tunnel, its wreckage never found. The third event. By 2020, the big tunnel had become a magnet for thrill seekers and paranormal investigators, despite warnings from locals. Sarah Nguyen, a freelance journalist with a knack for uncovering strange stories, decided to investigate. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in a good story. She brought a thermal camera, a high-powered flashlight, and a friend named Caleb, who was more skeptical than she was. They entered at dusk, the sky bruised purple above the tunnel's sealed entrance. Sarah had done her research. Henry Dixon's murder, the missing women, the unsolved case. She wanted evidence, something concrete to explain the stories. The tunnel was colder than she'd expected, the air thick with that same metallic tang Jake had described. Caleb held the thermal camera, its screen showing nothing but the cold blue of the tunnel walls. They walked for 10 minutes, the silence pressing in, when Sarah's flashlight caught something, a faint glow like a distant lantern flickering at the edge of her beam. "You see that?" she asked, but Caleb was staring at the thermal camera. "There's a heat signature," he said, his voice tight. "It's moving." The screen showed a warm, human-shaped blob, standing just out of sight. Sarah swung her flashlight, but there was nothing there. The glow she'd seen was gone. "Keep recording," she told Caleb, her journalist instincts kicking in. They moved deeper, the thermal camera picking up the same shape, always just ahead, always vanishing when they got close. Then the knocking started, sharp, insistent, coming from the walls themselves. Sarah's flashlight flickered and Caleb's camera glitched, the heat signature disappearing. "We're not alone," Caleb whispered, and Sarah felt it too, a presence, heavy and watchful, like the tunnel itself was staring at them. She called out, "Henry, is that you?" The air grew frigid, her breath frosting in front of her. The knocking stopped, and for a moment there was only silence. Then a voice, low, rasping, right behind her, whispered, "Dixon." Sarah spun, her flashlight beam cut through the dark, but there was no one there. Caleb grabbed her arm, his face pale. "We need to go, now." They ran, the tunnel seeming to stretch longer than it should, the darkness clawing at their heels. The knocking followed, faster now, like a drumbeat chasing them out. When they finally stumbled into the open air, Sarah's flashlight was dead, and Caleb's camera had shut off. The footage showed nothing but static, except for one frame, a faint, glowing figure holding a lantern standing at the tunnel's mouth. The tunnel, today, the big tunnel is still sealed, its entrances reinforced with concrete and steel, but that hasn't stopped the stories. Locals avoid it, especially at night, when the air around the entrance grows unnaturally cold. Commuters driving past report their car radios cutting to static, replaced by faint whispers of "Dixon" or "Help me." Some say they've seen a lantern's glow flickering in the sealed entrance, as if Henry is still there, patrolling the dark. Paranormal investigators keep coming, drawn by the EVPs and the footage, but few stay long. The tunnel's darkness is more than physical. It's heavy, oppressive, like it's waiting for something or someone. The knocks, the footsteps, the whispers, they never stop. And neither does the sense that Henry Dixon, struck down in 1908, is still searching for justice, his lantern burning in the endless night of the big tunnel. Story 10. Beneath Jefferson Park. My name is Clara, and I've lived in Richmond, Virginia, my whole life. Growing up, I heard the stories about the Churchill Tunnel, a cursed stretch of earth buried under Jefferson Park. Folks whispered about it in hushed tones, like it was a secret the city itself wanted to forget. They said the tunnel was bad news from the start. Built in the 1870s through soft, treacherous clay despite warnings from geologists. 9 men died digging it, crushed under collapsing earth or drowned in flooded shafts. But that wasn't the worst of it. In 1925, during a rebuild, the western end caved in, swallowing 6 workers, a locomotive, and a string of freight cars. 200 feet of dirt sealed them in like a tomb. Rescue efforts failed, and the bodies of 2 laborers, along with the steam engine, were left down there, abandoned. That's when the stories got strange. People claimed they heard things. The faint whistle of a train, screams echoing from below, and something worse, a creature that crawled out of the collapse. They called it the Richmond vampire, a monstrous thing with jagged teeth and rotten flesh. I never believed it, not until I moved into a house on the edge of Jefferson Park. It was late summer, and I'd just signed the lease on a small, creaky row house with a view of the park. The rent was cheap, and I figured the stories were just local color, something to spook tourists. My first night, I sat on the porch, watching fireflies blink over the grass. The air was thick, humid, and the park was quiet, too quiet. Around midnight, I heard it, a low, mournful sound, like a distant train whistle. I froze, my coffee mug halfway to my lips. The sound came again, fainter, as if it were rising from the ground itself. I told myself it was just a trick of the wind, maybe a far-off car horn. But my hand shook as I locked the door and went to bed. The next morning, I walked through Jefferson Park, curious. The sealed tunnel entrance wasn't hard to find, a crumbling arch of brick half hidden by overgrown vines. Tucked at the park's eastern edge, it looked harmless like an old cellar door. But standing there, I felt a chill, like the air itself was heavier. A jogger passed by, and I asked if she'd ever heard anything strange at night. She laughed, but her eyes darted to the arch. "You're new here, huh? Don't hang around that thing after dark. You'll hear stuff." She jogged off before I could ask more. That night, the whistle came again, sharper this time, followed by a faint, rhythmic thud, like metal on rails. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, my heart pounding. The park was empty, bathed in moonlight. I crept toward the tunnel entrance, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the dark. The air grew colder as I approached, and the ground felt soft, almost spongy. Then I heard it, a scream, raw and desperate, muffled like it was coming from deep underground. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The scream faded, replaced by a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the earth. I ran back to my house, bolted the door, and didn't sleep. The next day, I went to the library, digging through old newspapers. Yellowed articles confirmed the tunnel's grim history, the 1870s deaths, the 1925 collapse, the failed rescues. One clipping mentioned a worker who'd survived the cave-in, raving about a thing that crawled out of the rubble, a tall, gaunt figure with glowing red eyes and skin hanging off its bones. He said it fled into the park, vanishing near an old mausoleum. The article dismissed him as delusional, but a sketch in the margin showed a bat-like creature with jagged teeth. My stomach twisted. The mausoleum was still there, a squat stone structure in the park's oldest corner. I started noticing things after that. Shadows moved in the park at night, too tall and thin to be human. Sometimes I'd see a flicker of light near the tunnel entrance, like a lantern swaying in the dark. I stopped going outside after sunset, but the sounds followed me. The whistle became a nightly ritual, sometimes joined by faint, panicked cries. Once I swore I heard someone, or something, scratching at my back door. I checked the next morning. There were no marks, but the air smelled faintly of damp earth and decay. A week later, I met an old man named Amos at the corner store. He'd lived in Richmond for decades and had a weathered face that looked like it carried every story the city held. I mentioned the tunnel, half expecting him to laugh. Instead, he leaned close, his voice low. "You hear the screams, don't you? That's them boys still trapped down there. And that other thing, it ain't human, never was. It's been under the city since before the tunnel was built. The collapse just woke it up." He wouldn't say more, just shuffled off, muttering about staying away from the park. The sounds got worse. One night, the whistle was so loud it rattled my windows. I grabbed my phone, recording as I stepped onto the porch. So the air was foggy, the park a blur of gray. The whistle stopped, and for a moment there was silence. Then a sharp, guttural screech tore through the night, followed by the sound of claws scraping stone. My phone screen glitched, the recording cutting out. I backed inside, my heart hammering, and locked every door. But the noises didn't stop. They were closer now, like something was circling the house. I peeked through the blinds and saw it, a faint, red-eyed silhouette standing at the edge of the park, motionless. It was tall, too tall, its limbs unnaturally long. I ducked down, my breath shallow, praying it hadn't seen me. The next morning, I found footprints in the dirt outside my back door. They weren't human, too large, with claw-like marks at the toes. I called a friend, Mia, who worked at the city archives. She came over that evening, skeptical but curious. I showed her the footprints, and her face paled. "Clara, you need to move," she said, her voice trembling. She told me about an old surveyor's map she'd found, one that marked the tunnel's path. It showed something else, a network of older, unmapped tunnels beneath the park, predating the city itself. No one knew who'd built them or why, but they ran deeper than the Churchill Tunnel, connecting to caverns no one had explored. That night, Mia stayed over. We sat in the living room, lights on, trying to laugh off our fear. Around 2 a.m., the power flickered. The whistle started again, louder than ever, followed by a series of thuds, like something heavy was moving underground. Mia grabbed my arm. "Do you smell that?" she whispered. The air was thick with the stench of wet clay and rot. Then we heard it, a low, rasping voice, not quite human, murmuring words we couldn't make out. It was coming from the backyard. We ran to the window, but the fog was too thick to see anything. The voice stopped, replaced by a single, sharp tap on the glass. We screamed, scrambling to the bedroom and locking the door. The next day, we went to the mausoleum. I don't know why. Maybe I thought seeing it would make the stories feel less real. The structure was old, its stone door cracked and covered in moss. Mia pointed out strange marks on the ground nearby, like something had been dragging itself in and out. We didn't stay long. That night, I woke to the sound of scratching, not outside but inside the house. It was coming from the basement. I grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs, every step creaking. The basement was damp, the air heavy with that same rotting smell. The scratching stopped as I reached the bottom step, but my flashlight caught something. A faint, claw-like mark scratched into the concrete floor, pointing toward the wall that faced the park. I didn't sleep after that. I started packing, determined to leave, but the noises followed me everywhere. The whistle, the screams, the growls, they were louder now, more insistent. One night, as I shoved clothes into a suitcase, the power went out completely. The house was pitch black, and the air felt thick, like it was pressing against my skin. I heard footsteps, heavy, uneven ones, coming from the backyard. My phone was dead, my flashlight flickering. I hid in the closet, clutching a kitchen knife, listening as the footsteps circled the house. They stopped at the back door. Then, a single, deliberate knock. I held my breath, tears streaming down my face. The knock came again, slower, heavier, then silence. I moved out the next day, staying with Mia across town. But the sounds didn't stop. Even miles from the park, I'd wake to the faint whistle of a train or the echo of a scream. Last week, I walked past a newsstand and saw a headline about strange noises reported in Jefferson Park again. Locals said they'd seen a tall, red-eyed figure near the tunnel entrance, holding a flickering lantern. I don't go near the park anymore. I don't sleep much either, because every night, no matter where I am, I hear it. that low, rasping voice, whispering just beyond the edge of understanding, calling me back to the dark beneath Jefferson Park. Story 11. The Screaming Sewer. My name is Douglas Dillon, but everyone used to call me Doogie. I was 7 years old in January 1925, a small boy with a mop of brown hair and a love for chasing adventure. Montreal was my playground, its snowy streets a maze of wonder. But that winter, the city turned on me. It swallowed me whole. And now, all these years later, I'm still here, trapped in the dark, my voice echoing through the pipes. You've heard the stories, haven't you? The Screaming Sewer, they call it. That's me. This is my story, and it's not over yet. It was a bitter January evening, the kind where the cold bites your nose and the snow piles so high you can't see the road. I was out on Saint Denis Street, bundled in my patched coat, my boots crunching through the drifts. The blizzard had turned the city into a white haze, but I didn't care. I was chasing a hay wagon, its wooden wheels creaking as it rumbled down the boulevard. The horse's breath puffed in clouds, and I laughed, thinking I could catch it, my little legs pumping through the snow. I didn't see the manhole. No one did. It was uncovered, hidden under a fresh layer of powder. One moment I was running, the next I was falling. The drop was endless. My scream tore out of me as I plunged into the icy current below. The sewer was a roaring beast, its waters black and furious, churning with the storm's runoff. I thrashed, my hands clawing at the slimy walls, but the current was too strong. It dragged me under, tossing me like a rag doll. I screamed again, my voice bouncing off the tunnel walls, a desperate wail that no one above could hear. The cold burned my lungs, and the darkness swallowed me. I don't know how long I fought. It felt like forever. Then nothing. I woke up, but not in the way you'd expect. I wasn't in a hospital or back on the street. I was still in the sewer, but I wasn't me. Not anymore. My body was gone, swept away to the river, they say. But I was still here, my voice caught in the pipes, my fear woven into the damp stone. At first I didn't understand. I tried to climb out, to find my way back to the street, but the tunnels twisted and turned, a labyrinth that held me tight. I could feel the city above, the rumble of carts, the chatter of voices, but I couldn't reach it. I was trapped. The years passed, and I learned the sewer's secrets. It's alive in its own way. The water whispers, the pipes groan, and the shadows move when they shouldn't. I'm not alone down here, but I'm the loudest. People above started to notice. On stormy nights, when the gutters flood and the manholes sing with rushing water, my screams break through. They echo up to the streets, sharp and raw, like they were that first night. Folks cross the street to avoid the manhole on Saint Denis. They whisper about the screaming sewer, about the boy who fell and never came back. That's me, Doogie. But it's not just screams. Sometimes I try to reach out. I don't mean to scare them, but I'm so cold, so alone. I see people sometimes, workers in heavy boots or kids who dare each other to lift the manhole cover. I call to them, my voice small and pleading. Help me, I whisper, hoping someone will listen. Most of them run. One worker, a big man with a flashlight, froze when he heard me. I was right behind him, my voice brushing his ear. Help me, I said, softer than the drip of water. He dropped his tools and scrambled up the ladder, his face pale as the snow above. I didn't mean to frighten him. I just want someone to stay. It was 1947 when things changed. A group of kids, older than I was, snuck into the sewer on a dare. They called themselves explorers, their laughter bouncing off the walls as they splashed through the shallow water. I watched them from the shadows, my heart, or whatever I have left, aching. I wanted to join them to laugh like that again. I followed, keeping quiet at first, just listening. They had a lantern, its light flickering on the mossy bricks. One of them, a girl with braids, stopped suddenly. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The others laughed, but I could tell they were nervous. I couldn't help it. I giggled, just a small sound, like I used to when I was alive. It echoed louder than I meant, and the lantern fell. They screamed and ran, their footsteps fading into the dark. After that, more came, teenagers mostly looking for thrills. They'd heard the stories, and they wanted to hear me. I didn't always show myself, but sometimes I couldn't resist. I'd hum a tune my mother used to sing, or I'd let my footsteps patter behind them. Once, I brushed past a boy's shoulder, my touch cold as the water. He yelped and swung his flashlight, but there was nothing to see. Just me, invisible, watching as they scrambled away. I didn't want to hurt them. I just wanted them to know I was here. By the 1970s, the city had changed. The streets were busier, the buildings taller, but the sewer stayed the same. Dark, wet, and mine. The stories about me grew. People said the screaming sewer was cursed, that anyone who went too deep would never come back. They weren't wrong, not entirely. I don't know why, but some who come down here stay longer than they should. Not like me, not forever, but long enough to feel the weight of the dark. In 1974, a worker went missing. They found his tools near a junction, his flashlight still on, its beam pointing at nothing. They never found him. I saw him, though. He wandered too far, his steps slow, like he was listening to something. I tried to call him back, to tell him to turn around, but my voice only made him walk faster into the black. I don't know what takes them. Maybe it's the sewer itself, hungry in a way I can't explain. Or maybe it's me, my loneliness pulling them in. I don't want to believe that, but sometimes, when the water's quiet, I feel something else down here, something older, colder. It doesn't speak, but it watches. I stay away from the deepest tunnels, where the water runs slow and the air feels heavy. Even I'm scared of what's down there. In 1993, a group of urban explorers came, more serious than the kids before. They had maps, cameras, and ropes, like they were hunting for something. They talked about me, calling me the Dylan boy. I didn't like that. I'm not just a story. I followed them, closer than usual, letting my voice hum through the pipes. One of them, a woman with a recorder, caught my whisper. "Help me," I said, clear as I could. She played it back, her hands shaking, and the others argued about what it meant. They didn't stay long after that. I watched them climb out, their faces tight with fear. The woman looked back, just for a second, like she knew I was watching. I wanted to follow her, to see the sun again, but the sewer pulled me back. It's 2025 now, or so I've heard from the voices above. The city's louder, brighter, but the sewer hasn't changed. I'm still here, my screams riding the wind when the storms come. People still talk about me, though the stories shift. Some say I'm a ghost, others say I'm just a sound the pipes make. But I'm real, I'm Doogie, and I'm not alone anymore, not in the way I used to be. Others have joined me over the years, their voices faint, their shapes blurry in the dark. I don't know their names, but I hear them, crying or whispering in the tunnels. We don't talk, not like people do. We just exist, caught in the sewer's grip. Last week, a man came down alone. He wasn't a worker, not an explorer either. He had a flashlight and a notebook, scribbling as he walked. I followed, curious. He was muttering to himself something about finding the truth. I stayed close, letting my breath, cold and sharp, brush his neck. He stopped, his pen frozen over the page. "Who's there?" he called, his voice shaking. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But I reached out, my fingers grazing his hand, so cold he dropped the notebook. It fell into the water, the pages sinking into the murk. He ran, his flashlight beam swinging wildly, and I let him go. I didn't want him to stay. The sewer's restless now. The storms are worse, the water wilder, my screams are louder, and the others, those faint voices, are growing too. I don't know what's coming, but I feel it. Something's waking in the deep tunnels where even I don't go. Last night, I heard it, a low grinding sound like stone scraping stone. It wasn't the pipes, it wasn't me. I stayed near the manhole where the streetlight's glow leaks through, and I screamed, not for help this time, but to warn them, the people above, the ones who walk past without knowing. They need to stay away. I'm still here, trapped in the dark, my voice echoing through the pipes. The screaming sewer, that's what they call it. That's me, and I'm not done screaming. Story 12. Echoes of War in Abandoned City Hall Station. The air was thick with dust and silence as I stepped off the 6th train, my boots echoing against the platform of the long-abandoned City Hall Station. My flashlight's beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the vaulted ceilings and intricate tile work that hadn't seen regular passengers since 1945. I wasn't supposed to be here. No one was. The station had been sealed off decades ago, its elegant arches and chandeliers left to decay beneath Manhattan's bustling streets. But I'd slipped through a maintenance hatch, driven by the stories I'd heard, whispers of strange sounds, ghostly figures, and a past that refused to rest. My name is Clara, and I chase shadows for a living, documenting the unexplainable for a small online following. Tonight, I was here to test the legend of City Hall's haunted tunnels. The station was a cathedral of neglect. Green-tinted tiles gleamed faintly under my light, their patterns swirling like frozen waves. The air smelled of damp stone and something metallic, sharp enough to sting my nostrils. I'd read about the station's history. Built at the turn of the 20th century, it was a marvel of Victorian engineering, but its curved tracks couldn't handle newer, longer trains. So it was abandoned, left to rot beneath the city. But the real story, the one that drew me here, was older. During construction, workers reported eerie noises at night, cries, shouts, the distant boom of cannon fire. The site, they said, sat atop a forgotten Revolutionary War battlefield where soldiers fell in a brutal clash and were buried where they dropped. Locals claimed their restless spirits still haunted the tunnels, their voices echoing through the earth. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. The last 6 train had passed, looping through the station without stopping, its lights a fleeting glow in the dark. I was alone now, or so I thought. My camera hung around my neck, its red recording light a small comfort. I adjusted my backpack, heavy with spare batteries and a voice recorder, and started walking along the platform. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the drip of water somewhere in the distance. I spoke softly into the recorder, my voice steady, despite the unease creeping up my spine. October 23rd, 2025, City Hall Station. No signs of activity yet. Temperature's dropping, though. Feels colder than it should. At midnight, the air shifted. A low hum vibrated through the platform like the rumble of a train that never came. I froze, my flashlight sweeping the arches. The tiles seemed to shimmer, their patterns twisting in ways that made my eyes ache. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic clank, like boots marching in unison. It came from the tunnel ahead, where the tracks curved into darkness. My heart pounded, but I forced myself forward, camera raised. "If you're here," I whispered, "show me." The clanking grew louder, sharper, joined by a faint murmur of voices, harsh, urgent, speaking words I couldn't make out. I reached the tunnel's mouth and aimed my flashlight down the tracks. The beam caught something, a flicker of movement, like shadows shifting just beyond reach. I squinted, my breath catching as shapes took form. Men in tattered uniforms, their faces pale and indistinct, moving in a line. They carried muskets, their bayonets glinting in the light. I pressed myself against the wall, my camera shaking in my hands. The figures didn't see me. They marched past, their boots silent now, their eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. Then, as quickly as they appeared, they dissolved into the dark. I stood there, heart racing, replaying the footage on my camera. The screen showed nothing but empty tracks. No soldiers, no movement. Just my own panicked breathing caught by the microphone. I cursed under my breath and checked the recorder. It had picked up the clanking, faint but unmistakable, layered with whispers that sounded like orders barked in a language I didn't recognize. I wasn't imagining this. Something was here. I spent the next hour exploring the station, my flashlight tracing the ornate columns and arched ceilings. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the beam. At one point, I found a rusted maintenance door half hidden behind a pile of debris. It was ajar, just enough to squeeze through. Beyond it was a narrow service tunnel, its walls rough and unfinished. The air here was heavier, thick with that metallic tang. I hesitated, then stepped inside, my flashlight revealing a low ceiling and damp, uneven floors. The clanking returned, louder now, echoing from deeper in the tunnel. I followed it, my pulse a steady drum in my ears. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, its walls lined with cracked tiles. In the center was a pile of dirt and broken stone, as if someone had been digging or something had clawed its way out. The clanking stopped, replaced by a single sharp sound, a scream, raw and desperate, cut off as quickly as it began. I spun around, my flashlight darting across the walls. Nothing, but the air was freezing now, my finger numb around the camera. Then I saw it, a shadow, tall and angular, standing at the edge of the chamber. It wasn't human. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. I blinked, and it was gone. I backed away, my voice shaky as I spoke into the recorder. There's something else here, not just soldiers, something wrong. I didn't wait for it to reappear. I turned and hurried back through the tunnel, the clanking resuming behind me, faster now like a pursuit. I reached the platform, my flashlight flickering as if the batteries were dying. I swapped them out, coursing my shaking hands, and the light steadied. But the station felt different now, smaller, like the walls were closing in. The arches loomed overhead, their shadows twisting into shapes that didn't match the light. I checked my watch again. 1:15 a.m. I'd planned to stay until dawn, but the air was too heavy, the silence too alive. I moved toward the maintenance hatch, my footsteps loud in the stillness. That's when I heard the motors, the whisper, low, mournful, like a distant cry. I stopped, my skin prickling. It came again, louder, from the platform's far end. I turned, flashlight sweeping the darkness. Nothing. But the sound lingered, a wail that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I climbed through the hatch and ran, not stopping until I was back on the street, the city's noise a jarring contrast to the station's silence. At home, I reviewed the footage again. Still nothing but empty tracks. The recorder, though, caught everything. The clanking, the whispers, the scream. I uploaded a clip online and my followers went wild, demanding more. I didn't sleep that night. The shadow shape haunted me. Too tall, too wrong. 2 nights later, I went back. I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the pull of the unknown, the need to prove I wasn't crazy. This time, I brought a thermal camera, hoping it would catch what my eyes couldn't. The station was the same, dusty, cold, its beauty untouched by time, but the air felt heavier, like it was watching me. I set up the thermal camera and waited. At 12:03 a.m., the clanking started again, followed by the whispers. The thermal camera's screen lit up with faint, human-shaped heat signatures moving across the platform. I aimed my flashlight, but saw nothing. The signatures vanished, and the whispers stopped. Then a new sound, metal scraping metal, slow and deliberate. I turned, and there it was again, the shadow standing beneath an arch, its limbs stretched too far, its head twitching like a broken machine. My flashlight flickered, and the figure lunged faster than anything human. I stumbled back, dropping the thermal camera. The figure stopped inches away, its face a blur of darkness. Then it was gone. I grabbed the camera and ran, my chest tight with panic.